Welcome to the Counselor Professional Development Series, presented by College Week Live. My name is Richard Daly, and you are tuned into the live broadcast of supporting LGBTQ students through the college admissions process. Today, I will be discussing how counselors can help guide LGBTQ students in finding supportive college campuses and explore resources that can nurture their development. Please note that in order to receive hours towards your CEU, you must complete the brief survey at the end of this presentation. Before we get started, I'd like to also remind you that we will be taking questions in real time throughout the presentation. You can send me your questions anytime during the presentation through the box located at the lower left-hand side of your screen. To give you a little bit about myself, I co-presented a similar presentation at WACAC this past year, and I co-presented it, and we'll talk a little bit more about that presentation as well as some of the resources that came out of that. Also, I do identify as a gay black male, and I did my thesis in my undergraduate on masculinity, homosexuality, AIDS, and Black America. So this is a very passionate topic for me, for all students, but especially for the LGBTQ community. I also work with the Trevor Project, which is an organization that helps guide LGBT youth through navigating coming out issues, as well as suicide and relationship issues with religion or parents. And I've been working with them for the past 3 years. I also am on the board of directors for Joshua Home, an LGBTQ safe haven. This is a new community-based organization, a new nonprofit organization that's really dedicated to finding it's the first gender-inclusive permanent housing solution to LGBT homelessness, and we'll talk a little bit about homelessness as well. And all of these resources I have at the end of the presentation, and I can send you a copy of the presentation if you haven't received that already. Lastly, but surely not least, I am not a scholar. I am constantly learning, and I think everyone should be constantly learning. But I do know a lot about the topic, and I hope that some of the things we share today are going to be beneficial for you in working with this population. So, my favorite. What is LGBTQ+IAAA? LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBTQ+ are all terms that are meant to cover all people of alternative sexualities, gender identities. However, the full acronym is quite long, and even the one that I included in this presentation is not exhaustive. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender or transsexual, queer or questioning, pansexual, two-spirited, intersex, androgynous, asexual, and ally. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but in this presentation we'll be using LGBT, LGBTQ, or LGBTQ+. Let's talk a little bit about the state of LGBTQ youth in America. About 90% of LGBTQ students hear anti-gay slurs at school, and about a third of those come from staff members. That doesn't necessarily mean that a staff member outrightly, or even a student outrightly said something that was against the student, but a lot of language is very coded in anti-LGBTQ meanings. And so it's really important to be careful about language, or even just to know that a lot of these students are going to be carrying around a lot of these things that they hear all day. Also, many face physical violence at home or at school, both in fights, altercations. Even in school, students may receive different types of touching or advances from students that are unwanted. And again, this is a common occurrence among this population. LGBTQ youth are more likely than non-identified students to use alcohol and drugs. They also account for about 33% of suicides every year. That's a very, very troubling statistic that these LGBTQ youth are feeling the need to in their life because of some of the things that happen on a day-to-day basis, mostly at school. 25 to 40% of all homeless youth identify as LGBTQ, and that number is actually probably pretty conservative. LGBTQ homelessness is a huge epidemic in the country, and it's something that affects, obviously, students that are going to be in your high school classes and communities. These statistics are even higher for trans-identified students. Students who identify as trans are often more likely to be homeless, are more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, are more likely to end up in prostitution or other unsafe activities as a result of their trans identity. LGBTQ identities have also been seeing some positive strides in mainstream American society and wider acceptance in some of the recent years. That still doesn't take away from some of the issues that we have in America and in our schools, but it is great to see that so many states and so many communities are really getting behind LGBTQ identified students. The effects on education. 61% of LGBTQ identified students reported feeling unsafe at school, and were likely to feel unsafe due to their orientation or identity. Again, this is important because if you feel like you're unsafe at school, then you're not going to feel safe maybe going to your teachers or going to your counselors. You're not going to be focused as much on your education. You're going to be focused on some of those other issues that are happening in your classes, bullying and things of that sort. 25% of LGBTQ identified students reported missing classes or school due to feeling unsafe. Again, that is a staggering number of students who don't feel safe at school, and again are missing classes or full days of school because they don't feel like they can go to school and feel comfortable. And again, that affects schools and grades, as well as attendance and all of those things. 28% of LGBTQ students drop out of high school due to feeling unsafe, and that's also a staggering number. We have almost a third of these students are not completing high school, and that also feeds into some of the unsafe things like drugs and alcohol and prostitution, as well as homelessness that we've seen in some of these populations. 26% of LGBTQ youth are forced to leave home due to their orientation or identity. And that is also a staggering number. We have, again, about a quarter of the students are not accepted by their families, by their religious communities, and as a result, they're thrown out of their house and forced to live on the street, maybe forced to live in a shelter or possibly, hopefully, with a friend, but most of the time they are going to be relegated to some of the street activity. What happens on high school campuses? Bullying often happens in high school. But many schools and districts are now really jumping on the anti-bullying campaigns that we have, both through the It Gets Better project, as well as a number of other organizations. A lot of schools really have a lot of punishments against bullying, cyberbullying as well, and this has really created a better climate for high school students. But again, we're still looking at the 90% of students who receive those anti-LGBTQ slurs every day. We're still seeing students who feel physically unsafe on campus as well. It's important to realize that when we're talking about these populations, that these students are still high school students. We don't want to look at these students as potentially that they're the separate sect that doesn't also want to grow into their identities, that doesn't want to connect with their peers, have relationships, feel cool and feel accepted and wanted in their school friend group as well as their community. And I think it's really important for this population to mention that there are some students who are out at school and not at home. And what that means is that students may identify as LGBTQ at school. They may dress differently, or they may be dating other students on campus, but they may not have that same openness at home. And so it's really important as a counselor or as an educator to make sure that you know what the policies or how that student identifies at home, so that way if you do have conversations with their parents or the guardians, you can make an educated guess. So that, you can make an educated decision about whether or not that student is out, because again, 26% of students are getting kicked out of their homes because of their identity. So you're going to want to make sure that you know whether or not that student has told their parents or their families that they do identify as LGBTQ. Some of the things that a high school campus can do. I'm sure a lot of your high school campuses are doing many things to help your students in terms of in terms of making sure that students feel safe on campus. Again, those anti-bullying campaigns and whatnot. What you're definitely going to want to make sure is that that students know that their conversations are confidential. That's really important for students. A lot of students don't know. Even if they're first generation, especially if they're first generation or minority or low income students, they may not know that having a conversation with a counselor is actually a safe thing to do, or something that they can say to an administrator or a person of authority, and that conversation won't get back to home. Obviously, some of us are going to be hindered by mandated reporting, but it is important for you to make sure that you let them know, hey, if you do want to share anything, I don't have to share everything with your parents, other than, if you feel like you're going to hurt yourself or something more serious than that. You also want to maybe connect with school groups on your high school campus. You may have a Gay Straight Alliance or Queer Student Association or some other type of LGBT identifying group. You may want to reach out to them and let them know, hey, I'm here to help. I'm here to talk if you have any questions. And again, letting them know that those conversations are confidential may be really beneficial for those students. If you don't have one of those on your high school campus, that may be a really great opportunity for you to share that with, or to build that into your high school. Start an LGBT group on campus and have students participate, because that's a really great, even if a student doesn't identify as LGBT outwardly at school, they may still feel more comfortable if there is a group like that on campus. You may be able to create a safe zone or safe space program in your office or around the campus. And here's a little, this is a safe zone sign that I really appreciate. It talks about sexual orientation, family life, peer pressure, body image, as well as friendship, gender identity, HIV and AIDS, race. It really doesn't just pigeonhole the safe space zone to LGBTQ issues. And I think that this is, again, something that we want to make sure that we don't force these students into thinking of themselves only as LGBTQ, but we look at them as, again, full students, full humans, and they have other identities outside of their LGBTQ status. And again, you want to remember that every student is different. You may have some students that come into your office and tell you that they identify as LGBTQ, but they don't identify at school or at home. And so you're going to want to make sure that, again, you're not thinking more on a generalized, but you're really individualizing your connection with each student, because I think that's really important in advising students through this process, especially in high school. And now we can talk a little bit about assisting students in the college search. We'll primarily be using the Campus Pride's Advising LGBTQ Students through the college admissions process, which was a resource guide created by Eric Felix, who is a PhD student at USC. and Eric Belmal, who is an educational advisor and TRIO Student Support Services at Rio Hondo College. They created that with Campus Pride last year, and that was primarily what the WCAG presentation was based on. You can find that on the Campus Pride website, as well as in the resources at the end of this presentation. But that is a really great resource for college admissions counselors, for college counselors to find different books and other resources, also different worksheets for students to use, especially when they're starting that college search, listing out what are some of the things that are important to them, as well as some of the other things that they may not quite think of. Again, first you want to remember that these students, again, are like all other students. Again, I think that it's important to use their LGBT status as one of many parts. You don't want to just look at the student as an LGBT student and point blank, that's it. Be sure that students are also thinking across all aspects of the university. So not just LGBTQ friendliness, but also location, population, class size, academic, athletic, or extracurricular activities, study abroad opportunities. There are many opportunities at universities and many things that students can use in order to make a selection, but I think it's important for students to look at something broader than solely the LGBTQ friendliness. That's a huge part, especially for this population, but you don't want to say, okay, this school has 5 stars on LGBTQ friendliness, so as a result, that's the school you should go to. You should also look at some of the other opportunities. The Campus Climate Index is also through Campus Pride, and it is a great resource for students as well as college counselors to become familiar with some schools who really have done the extra work in order to be LGBT friendly. Campus Pride has a database of schools ranked on their LGBTQ friendliness, and it's a really great opportunity for students to use that and find colleges that fit the size and scope as well as the friendliness that they're looking for. You can also use school websites. A lot of school websites who may not have filled out the Campus Climate Index, they may have information on their LGBT status or their LGBT clubs, or even scholarships that they may have that Campus Pride isn't necessarily aware of. So make sure that if a student is interested in a school that isn't on the Campus Climate Index, that they're then able to go in and to the school's website and maybe find some information there. For trans students, there are different worries that a trans student might face, such as gender-neutral housing. And gender-neutral housing is housing not based on your assigned birth sex, but you may have been born as a male, but identify as a female. And so gender-neutral housing is great for a trans student, and that may be important for them when they're applying to schools. Also, gender identity. There's a lot of schools that say male or female, and that may make a student uncomfortable. So I would say, again, you may want to contact those schools and ask them what their process is for students who identify as trans. Name change policies on campus as well. Some schools have very easy name change processes. All you have to do is show a legal document of a name change, and they will change your email address. They'll change all of your records in the school. Other schools are not as lenient. There are some schools that don't require legal documentation in order for you to change your name as well. And so it just depends on that school. And again, those students are going to have a little bit more work that they need to do in order to ensure that they are feeling safe and welcomed on the campuses that they go to. Additionally, with these students, many of them may lose their parental support or their financial support because they identify as LGBTQ. Some of them may lose it before they even start in college. So it's important to have access to institutions that have LGBT scholarships. I know one of them is I believe Wake Forest College, there's another one. UCLA has some scholarships, as well as Columbia Teachers College, all have LGBT-specific scholarships, and there's many more schools. So definitely institutions may have LGBTQ scholarships that you want to check out. National scholarships as well. There's national scholarships, there's the Point scholarships. Point is an organization, the Point Foundation is an organization that really supports LGBTQ youth and education, and they have scholarships as well, so you can definitely use their website as a database to find more scholarships for these students. And then the Campus Pride LGBT Scholarship Database. There's many more. There's the HRC, a Human Rights Campaign LGBT Scholarship Database as well, and many others. But you're going to want to make sure that when you're assisting these students that you also at least have a brief knowledge of some of the other opportunities that students have in paying for their education, because many students have lost that in the future. I got a question here. It says, well, we'll come back to that later. Thank you, Ryan, for sending your question. We'll come back to that in a second. You also, when you're applying to colleges, you want to make sure that students are themselves in their application. Again, these students are not only LGBTQ, but they also are many other things. And for a lot of students, their LGBTQ identity is the primary identity that they connect to. And so what you're going to want to do is make sure that the student uses their identity as a launching pad to talk about something that they learned or that they grew from, rather than just it being a difficult situation. Many students, not only LGBT students, but many students use some difficult times in their life as a kind of as a way to say, oh, I had this hard time and that's why I'm applying to this school. We really, as admissions counselors and admissions professionals, we really encourage students to use those difficult times to talk about some of the learning that they've and growth that they've had from those experiences, rather than just that it's a difficult experience. Also, let students know that it's okay to not come out. Many students feel like, okay, should I come out? Should I not come out? It's really a student's choice, and that goes from not only coming out to their parents or coming out to their friends at school, but also coming out in the application process. For a lot of colleges, for a lot of students, it's nerve-wracking to think, oh, if I come out, am I going to be denied? Many colleges don't deny students based on gender identity or sexual orientation, and I think most of them don't. But again, that's a student's choice that whether or not to come out. So it's really, really important to not force students to come out if they're not comfortable. I have another question here. I'm going to look over it really quick. Serenity. At the end of this webinar, there is a resources page, as well as I have my email address, and you can access the Safe Zone sign, as well as all of the resources that we have here on the presentation. And David Chehi said, do we support Common Application adding questions to identify LGBT orientation and expand LGBT choice or options? Personally, I think that it is important for students to have the opportunity to identify as other than male or female. However, for LGBTQ, or for LGBT or identifying as that, I don't necessarily think that that's a great question. For some colleges, it is a great question because they're looking for adding that diversity in their LGBTQ populations. But for some schools, that's not as of an important piece of that student. Maybe that student shares that in the essays or some of the other things in their application. But I don't think that asking a question, do you identify as LGBTQ, necessarily is beneficial for every college. Okay, queries. Firstly, I did want to go back to Ryan Lopez's question. Please feel free to use the question box at the lower left side of your screen. But I got a question that says, my girlfriend and I are both trans, and my parents think I'm a lesbian. I'm going to be paying for her college, so how would I go about telling my parents and them helping me look for colleges? In telling your parents, that's a very difficult thing for me to tell you. Yes, you should tell your parents. That's a decision that you have to make. If you do wish to tell your parents that you identify as trans, or that if you do wish to tell your parents that you identify as trans, you really have to think about, are you safe? Are you comfortable? Can you support yourself without the help of your parents? That's really the first thing for every student that I would suggest is, can you support yourself? Are you going to be in a safe place if your parents do decide to kick you out or remove financial support for your college education? Are you going to be able to support yourself first? And then from that step, you can go into finding more information about, if your parents do accept you, then again, the Campus Climate Index is a really great resource. And again, that's at the end of this presentation. You can find all of the resources that I've used in this presentation. Another option is to use the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign. I believe has a number of schools that also are LGBT identified or LGBT friendly. I have another question here. It says, how do I apply to stay in a LGBT living learning community at a college? Would it be part of the application? That's a great question as well. There are some schools that do have LGBT living learning communities. There are some schools that believe that their whole campus should be that, but I know a number of private schools as well as public schools have those opportunities. Really, whatever schools you're applying to, you're going to want to reach out to those schools and ask them if they have a separate application for those, or if it comes with the housing packet, or can you apply directly while you're applying for the school. It looks like there's a mixture of counselors as well as current students or high school students that are looking for more help in finding a home for them. So I think that's great. Here's my contact information. If anyone has any more questions, I definitely would love to answer them. No more questions? Alrighty, well, thank you so much for your time and tuning into the presentation. Please remember to complete the survey at the end of the session to earn your CEU Contact Hour. We hope you will join us again on June 10th for the next session titled STEM Condition Report, hosted by Stephen Triplett of ACT. My name is Richard Daly. Thank you so much for joining us.